This Monday.com ad was created by a team of people and AI agents. Reese, our content agent, wrote the copy based on our best practices, like mentioning Monday.com 3 times. That was the second. Johnny, our coordination agent, built the timeline and kept everyone aligned. Olivia, our human creative director, stayed in the loop. Because agents are great, but they don't always know when a joke lands. She had one note: tell listeners it only takes minutes to build an agent. So, minutes. Create your own AI agent today on Monday.com.
Still waiting in line? Again? That's time you'll never get back. Save time and money with Stamps.com. Over 4 million businesses have skipped the line with Stamps.com. Join them to save up to 90% off carrier rates from your computer or phone right now. Print postage for certified mail, registered mail, and packages in seconds. Then schedule a pickup right from your home or office. For a limited time, go to Stamps.com and use code PODCAST for a free welcome gift. Taxes and fees apply.
Welcome to The Bridge, the show that bridges the gap between Eastern and Western medicine, science and spirituality, physical and energetic health. If you're a leader seeking to heal from within, ultimately achieving the pinnacle of health and well-being for your mind, body, and spirit, then rest assured, this show is tailored just for you. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Rogers, the Sherlock Holmes of health. I'm a trailblazing Harvard-trained epidemiologist turned transformational health coach. Basically, I find the clues that every other healthcare practitioner missed because they were looking in the wrong place. Welcome to The Bridge. And this episode is a little bit of an unplanned episode. And it's a special episode because what I want to do is bust a research myth or a science myth for you. From time to time, whether it's in a guest episode or an episode that I'm just recording on my own for you, regardless of where it comes up, if there's ever a question around something that I can ground in research, science, and or truth for you, then I'm going to come here, do a follow-up, and clarify that for you. That's really important to me. I always want you to understand what health information you can trust and whether it's right for you. And I want to continue to help you understand how you can be a better skeptic and a better critic when you're learning health information, no matter where it's coming from. What came up in the first interview with Leslie was the topic of the 10,000 steps that, if you're familiar at all with physical activity recommendations, then you've probably heard the number 10,000 steps as a recommendation. And that can be considered like, a lot of people consider it some kind of threshold, that's the main goal. You should be trying or aiming for 10,000 steps per day, and that is some sort of standard that we should all be working toward achieving on a daily basis. And there's actually been science and research around this, but it did come up on my first episode with Leslie that the 10,000 steps doesn't actually come from science and research. And so I supported that statement in that episode, and I still stand by that statement. So what I want to come here to do in this episode is just briefly explain where exactly the 10,000 steps comes from and how it did then get integrated into science and research. And I think this is really important for you all to understand because you need to take everything with a grain of salt. Even if something is eventually integrated into science and research, it doesn't mean that that's where it started. So where does the 10,000 steps come from? That's what I want to tell you about today. I think this is pretty cool. So 10,000 steps. Where does this daily recommendation come from? Well, I'm actually proud to say I can tie this to some of my own former research. And some of my former research was very much in the area of physical activity research. I'm an expert on this topic. And physical activity research was very much an integral part of my own dissertation. So I love this kind of stuff and I nerd out about it. And I actually know some of the researchers personally that I'm going to get to talk about today, and they are amazing. So where does the 10,000 steps a day come from? Well, it actually turns out that Leslie, in part one of her interview, is exactly right. And the 10,000 steps a day recommendation is not actually something that originated in science. So there wasn't some scientific basis to this. And there weren't any researchers out there that decided, okay, we're going to take a look and see what the threshold is and how many steps a day people should be taking. It kind of happened the other way around. And this is a really important lesson. So 10,000 steps a day. If you look back, and you'll be able to find this information yourself, I'm sure online, probably a basic Google search will bring this up. But the origins of the 10,000 steps a day actually go back to the year 1965. I have read some references that say 1964. So you may see a little bit of a variation there, but 1965, let's just stick with that. There was actually a Japanese company that created a device, and they named it Manpo-kei or Manpo-kei. And that translates quite literally to the 10,000 steps meter. So the 10,000 steps actually came as a marketing tool. It came from a marketing tool, but it then did go into scientific research. And why is that? Really, because of what tends to happen a lot is that 10,000 steps number became so ingrained in our health consciousness. And if you look at like fitness, there's all kinds of fitness trackers, pedometers, things right now are connected to your phone, your Apple Watch, whatever you use to track your steps, if you are tracking your steps or your fitness in any way. And I used to do a lot of really cool studies on pedometers and step counts. I actually did a correlation study once comparing a pedometer, an electronic versus a old-fashioned pedometer. And anyway, I was really into health tech at the time, and this stuff is really cool and interesting. So I know a lot about it. The default setting in a lot of like fitness tracks, apps, trackers and apps, things like that, is actually 10,000 steps. And that is just a lesson in how even when something is born out of marketing, that it can become really ingrained in our health consciousness. I think there's a couple of important lessons here. One of them just being how trainable we are. And I think it's really good that we now start to shift toward remembering that we know our health and bodies best, and that we learn to be healthy skeptics of the information that we read and receive. But how this came to be integrated, incorporated into actual science and research, one of those pathways is through one of the epidemiologists that I have always looked up to throughout my career, and her name is Dr. Aimin Lee. She is an epidemiologist out of Harvard, and at Brigham and Women's Hospital. She's a professor, like I said, a professor of medicine at Harvard Med School, and she is a top-notch researcher on physical activity, world-renowned in that field specifically of research. So she and Dr. Aimin Lee and her colleagues decided that they were just going to look to see if there was a scientific basis for the 10,000 steps and whether there was any validity to that. So they actually did a study where they looked at those exact questions. How many steps a day are actually associated with things like lower mortality? Does a step intensity level of stepping make a difference when people take the same number of steps? For example, 10,000 steps per day. So Aimin Lee and her colleagues had been studying the relationship of physical activity and health in older women for quite some time. So for them, it made sense to continue studying these concepts within that same population of women. So keeping that specifically in mind. Now, other studies have been done incorporating men, women, and all types of, in a wide range of populations that are very diverse. So we have to keep that in mind, right? When a study is done in just women, we can't say it's necessarily applicable to anybody, but other than women that are representative of the same women in that particular study. So keep that in mind when you read any kind of research or science. Take a look at who's in the study. We'll talk more about this kind of stuff in other episodes. However, back to the point, because she'd already been studying this physical activity and health in older women, it made sense to continue to study these same populations. So she actually looked at quite a large sample of women, over 16,000 women between the ages of 62 and 101 years old. And She looked at these women between 2011 and 2015, and they wore tracking devices that are called accelerometers, and they wore them during waking hours with just the question in mind that they wanted to answer being, are more steps associated with fewer deaths? And some of the key findings were that women who averaged about 4,400 or 4,400 steps a day had a 41% reduction in their mortality rate. And they actually found that mortality rates progressively improved before they actually started to level off at, guess what number? About 7,500 steps, 7,500 steps, not 10,000. So that's an interesting finding. And so if mortality or death, that's just death, is a concern of yours, but I would also equate this to overall health and well-being, that you can benefit from 7,500 steps a day, which is 25% fewer steps than the more commonly known goal of 10,000. Now, there, of course, were limitations to this study. Like I said, it was only looking at women, and they did not look at any other types of outcomes that I would have liked to have seen them report on, such as quality of life, physical condition, cognitive function, things like that. So it doesn't necessarily tell us how many steps we need to aim for to maximize our quality of life in this particular study, or to help prevent, physical or cognitive decline, which are really important questions. The bigger picture here, and there, like I said, there are other studies I could cite for you, but I wanted to just make this general point of where the 10,000 steps comes from in this episode. And you can go find other studies out there that look at this number and step counts in a variety of different research populations that are more generalizable to our average, global population of adults. So we have seen this type of research done in other ways, looking at other outcomes that are important for us, like quality of life and ability to prevent and minimize health issues. The point being that think about where things come from. Take everything with a grain of salt that you hear, even if it's coming in a research study, because that doesn't necessarily mean that that number or that information is where it originated. And I also want to just share that just because something is in a research study does not make it truth, does not make it fact. And I think that's really important. This is coming from a research scientist. We have to look at everything from an eye of skepticism and ask ourselves how to really translate appropriately and interpret appropriately what research and science actually means for us. So throughout the remainder of this show, over time, I'm going to do episodes on my own for you here where I will literally train you on how to read anything related to science and research and how to become your own detective and determine whether it's something you can trust. So whether it's bullshit or not, whether it's right for you, even if it is based in some validity. And these are important things to know how to do. How do you know what health information to trust and whether it's right for you? There are so many ways I'm going to teach you step by step how to become a better sleuth on your own. And I think this is really important. So I hope that this was enlightening for you all. Like I said, when things like this come up from time to time on the show, I'll pop in here and do a little brief episode like this to give you more of an understanding into what's behind these kinds of comments on the show. And in the meantime, I'll see you next time, sending lots of positive energy around today. And I hope you can feel it. Thanks for listening to today's episode of The Bridge, a transformational health podcast with Dr. Elizabeth Rogers. To learn more about my work and ways you can get support to transform your own health, head to my website, drelizabethrogers.com. Don't forget, Rogers has a D and a G. You can find a link in the show notes too. I hope you can feel the big boost of positive energy I'm sending all around right now. Can't wait to connect with you on the next episode.